Welcome back to Microservices and Go. This video we're going to be covering the get, update, and delete operations for our API. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps out the channel, helps me grow and keep uploading this content for you to learn from and enjoy. Thanks. So get home by ID. Okay, so let's go ahead and start implementing this one. This is a get request. We don't need to have any any requested body. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's make a response type. Get home by ID response. And one thing that I'm noticing already is we're going to have a lot of duplication here on this home response. There's ways around it. We could do, for example, something like type home response struct, and we could put this here. And let's change this over. So home response, home response, home response. Okay, there's a home response. All right, so in get home by ID, eventually we're going to get that home response back and we're going to return it. So I'm going to copy down this. All right, so we got the home ID, let's use it. So we need to get the database and we need to query. And then finally we'll return the home. So let's get the database from context. So we're going to do this same thing here. All right, and this is the first time we're seeing error, so we need to just put the colon there. And let's query for the home. So we can do db.getHome, pgdb, and our home ID. Okay, and just like before, let's create that function. So I'm going to copy this, bring it down. We're not actually inserting, we're just querying here. So get home and home ID, and that's just a string. And let's paste that in. This is the first time we're seeing error. Okay, so this is slightly different than create. We're just passing in a string as an ID, and we can just directly use that string in this query. So we're going to query the home, we're going to get the agent relation, and we're going to return the home and the error. All right, let's hop back to API. So this returns a home and an error. And let's handle the error. Error.error just to get the string. And this needs to be error does not equal no. Okay, bad request. All right, so that looks okay there. This one was a little bit more straightforward. So let's try and run this again. Let's test the error if the home isn't found, and then we'll test when the home is found. All right, so we're back, and I ran Docker Compose down, so all of my previous homes that we created are gone. So we'll need to recreate a home first. So we create a home, and this home has the ID of 1. So let's try to curl that. So curl localhost homes, and I'm actually going to go up to our API where we define this. So homes / an ID. So let's try to do the error case too. So I'm going to do 250. And let's curl that, and let's do JQ. Okay, awesome. So we tried to get the home with ID 250, and we got this error here, PG, no rows in result set. So there's no rows with that ID 250. So that's exactly what we want. And now let's try with 1, the one that we created. Cool, so we see we get back the success true, error is empty, and we get our actual home with the agent that we just created. So that's working as expected. All right, and let's go down. What's next? Get home. So this gets all the homes. Yeah, so let's implement this. So this one, awesome. So we have get homes response. Yep, that looks good. One other thing I'm going to change this from get homes response to just homes response. And I'm going to copy down the success and the error that we had here and bring them down. One thing I realized, we don't need this because we changed to that generic home response type. All right, where were we? Right here. So we have home response, singular, and we also have homes response, which is just an array of homes instead. So that looks good. So here we don't need anything from the, like we don't have a request body, we don't have any URL parameters. We just need to get the database from context and send a response. So let's copy all this down. And we are using a homes response now, which has homes, and we'll get homes back. Eventually, we'll get it from the database. Okay, so let's get the database from context. And you can see this is a piece of code we're duplicating a lot. So maybe this would be something good to refactor out into a little utility function, but I'll leave that up to you. Okay, pgdb and db.get homes. And let's pass in pgdb, and that's it. We don't need any IDs. Okay, so let's go into our home database and let's get all these. And we're going to say get homes, and doesn't take any parameters. All right, so here let's do homes, and we have a make. What does make take? It takes the type and the size, so we'll do an array of home pointers and 0. GoPG is actually smart enough to know what model we're reading into, and whether to return a single or multiple rows. So previously, we just wanted to return a single row, which is why we have this where home.id equals a home ID. In this case, we don't need a where clause, and we're just going to do select, and this is going to return all of the records into this homes array here. Okay, so what's there? Homes, and we need to pass this. Let's go back to our API. And what is this complaining about? Oh. Type home is not equal to db.home. Okay, so we'll put these as pointers. It needs to be a pointer. All right, that looks okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and restart this here. All right, so we're back up and running, and let's create some homes. Create 1, 2, 3 homes. And now let's curl all of them. So the API for getting all homes is just /homes. All right, so we get an error here. And what is our error? All right, so I found the error here. db.model, it takes an address, so it takes a pointer. So when we set up make, we didn't put the address that we're looking for. So just correct that there, add an address there. Okay, so db.getHomes, and now we see we get a single home returns. If I create a couple more, so we have 4 homes, and let's call /homes. So here's all of our homes, and they also come with the relationship, the agent relationship. Cool. So there is get homes. What's next here? So update home by ID. Oh, right. So let's create the request. So this is going to have a request body. And for this request, I imagine it'll look pretty similar to this, but we'll just have an additional ID column. And that ID column will tell us which home record we're going to try to update. So let's go ahead, update home request. And this is going to be almost identical to that create home. So I'm just going to find that and copy this down. Okay, but we have an ID. which is N64. Yeah. Update home by ID. So for some reason, previously we had this coming in as a URL parameter. We'll have it come through the body. So let's go to create. We're going to do this same process. We're going to parse the request body. We'll also get the database, and we'll call we'll call update. So this is the exact same. We'll just change the request type. Update home. Okay. And also similarly to create and get home by ID, we're going to return that response eventually. So let's bring this down. So now we just need to get that home. Update the home. So db dot update home, and we're going to pass in pgdb and the request. Okay, so I'm on just go PG's docs here. Really easy to find this. You can just go to their GitHub and click the PG documentation link. That'll take you right there. So I just did a search for update, and they have an example here. So to update it, db.model, you pass in your model here, and then you can just call where PK, and this does a ID match, essentially. So the primary key must match, and then you can just call update. So that'll take whatever is in book, whatever's in the model you passed in, and it will just write it into the database. So we can do that. So update home, and we'll take a DB model here. So db.home. And let's fill all fields. And our ID, yep, it'll be request.ID. That'll be the price. Okay, so that just takes in this full model with the ID this time. Let's go into home, and let's go to create home. And we're going to rename this to update home. And this time we're going to do update. And also we need to add this where PK clause, where the primary key matches. Okay, so we update it, and then we're going to query it again, just in the case that we updated the agent ID. So maybe we changed to a different agent and they'll have a new name. Update home. So let's go back to the API, and this will return our home and error. Let's handle the error. Looks good. And besides that, we just send the home. Okay. So let's build this and run it. All right, back. So I'm going to create a home first with ID 1, and then let's jump into request. So I'm going to do this put. Let's see, what do we define the API really quick here? So put home ID. Okay. So this changes a little bit. Okay, so that's why we had the chi URL parameter. Okay, all makes sense now. Let's go back down to update. So we are going to use, we are going to get the home ID. Where is this? Let's see, home ID. So we're just going to grab that from the URL parameter. Okay, and we're going to parse it into our request. Let's get rid of ID so we don't need that in the request body. And here, where we actually call the database, this is where we'll get the home ID in play. So we'll put home ID, and we're going to need to convert that into an integer. And we see here there's an error, cannot use type int as int64. So easiest way to convert that to an int64, we'll just use this right here. All right, so that clears that out. Cool. Okay, so now we have our int64 ID. We can pass that to update home, and that's going to update our database where the primary keys match. All right, so let's try to run this. Cool, we're back. I'm going to go ahead and create a home. And let's jump into request.json. And we don't need that anymore just because of the API routing. So price 123. This time, let's change this to 123 and ABC and 555. Okay. So now let's build this. So we're going to change the request to put homes, and now we need to pass the ID. So first, let's do 123. So that home doesn't exist. So we should get an error. Yep. And we get that no rows in result set error. That means it wasn't found. And now let's pass in 1. And we see we get our updated home back. 555 ABC, and this time 123. And let's just call get homes just for good measure. We see get homes also returns the home with the updated values in it. Okay, so I think we just have one more API to work with here, and that is delete home by ID. This one here, we don't need that response. We have the generic home response now. So let's get rid of that. Same thing as put, we will need this. It'll be the URL parameter. Okay, so similarly, we're going to use a lot of the same stuff we did in put. So we're going to get the database. We're also going to parse the int. We're going to parse the home ID into a int64. We're also going to call the database, and we're also going to return a response. So we can bring down a lot of this. And pieces we will change pretty much right here. So we won't pass this back. We're just going to pass the home ID. Was it int? Yeah. Int home ID, and this needs to be delete home. Delete home by ID. Let's see. We just called this update home, so I'll just call this delete home as well. Should be a little bit consistent. And let's bring this down. Delete home. And this is just going to take a home ID, which is a string. Cool. Okay, so let's get rid of all of this. Delete home is just going to return an error if anything went wrong. So we have a home ID. So we're going to use this similar pattern here. And I believe there's a delete. Yeah. So there's a delete function here. So we can do delete, and that'll delete the record. So we need a home, like the model here, and we can do where pk and just call delete. So let's do that. db.model. Sorry, we don't want to return that. db.model and home. We just want the ID, and that's home ID. And that's, sorry, that's not a string, that's an int64. Okay. Delete, and let's do the where pk clause. Okay, and finally we'll just return error. All right, so this is gonna just try to delete the home where the ID matches, and we just return an error if anything went wrong. So let's go back into API, and now we just return one variable. All right, so that looks good, and we'll just do nil. So we deleted the home, so we don't really need to return anything. All right. And what's going wrong here? So this is the first time we've used that. So we need to put the colon in, and for some reason I didn't copy down the URL parameter. Let's get that, and let's put this on top here. Okay, and let's try to rerun this here. Cool, so we're up and running. Let's create a home. So there's our home with ID 1, and now we can just delete that home. So let's do curl x delete localhost, and let's do 123 first. So that home should not be found. And okay, so it looks like there's a little different error model with how it deletes records. Let's try get homes first. So let's see. So our home wasn't deleted, so that's good. And now let's try deleting home1. We get success true. Now let's check our homes again. Cool, so we see our homes is empty now. So it looks like it tries to delete, and even if the record doesn't exist, even if the ID doesn't exist, it will return a success. So potentially, if you didn't like that, and if you wanted to like return a 404, if the record doesn't exist, you could either try to query it here first. So you could do like a select. You could do a select here first, and if there's an error, return it. But if you don't care, you could just always return the 200. Let's actually try to do that select first thing. And let's pull this out. Okay, so we'll build a home. We're going to try to select it. And if error does not equal nil, we'll return the error. So we'll check if it exists first. If it doesn't exist, we'll get that no result set and we'll return it. Otherwise, we're just going to try to delete it and return any errors that happen on deletion. So let's try that out. All right, back, and let's try to delete. Yeah, so there we see no rows in result set. Okay, so there's delete home by ID. And I believe that's all of our APIs that we have, right? Create, get by ID, get all, update by ID, and delete home by ID. Cool. So there is definitely some cleanup you could do, refactoring maybe some of these requests. They're pretty similar. And some of these responses, they're pretty similar as well. But overall, there's our API. So we've set up our repo, we've set up our database, migrations, our API. Looks like now the last thing to do is actually get this built and deploying onto Heroku. So we will take a look at that in our next video. This one's pretty long here, so I'll go ahead and cut this. I'll cut this now and get this uploaded for you guys. Yeah, so in our next video, we're going to complete this and we'll actually deploy our little microservice and we'll test it out on Heroku. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. It shows me that what I'm doing is helpful to you out there. And yeah. All right, as always, I will see you in the next video.